seats up at the front here. There's two over here. The Chick-fil-A was definitely a draw. Note to self for future events.
Got me here.
Yeah. Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Stephen Balcom. I'm the CEO of the Family Online Safety Institute. The organization is an international nonprofit whose mission is to make the online world safer for kids and their families. And we do that by identifying and promoting best practice tools and methods in the field of online safety, which also respect free speech. And that balance is the one that lies at the heart of everything that we do, and I think actually will probably lie at the heart of the discussions we're going to have this afternoon as well. This is the fourth in a series of Hill panels. The other three are up on our YouTube channel, so that's youtube.com/FOSI, and you'll see the complete conversations and dialogues that we had up there. We're also, by the way, using #FOSI on Twitter today. Any one of you out there tweeting? I certainly did before I came, so I'm all right. But there you are. So let me start. Let me get straight into the panel and introduce our guests today. The first, here on my right, is Mercedes Salem, Legislative Counsel in the Office of Representative Linda Sanchez. Next, we have Jason Tuber, Legislative Assistant in the Office of Senator Robert Menendez. And last but not least, Adam Thierer, Senior Fellow with the Progress and Freedom Foundation and Director of the PFF's Center for Digital Media, wearing a very nice bow tie today. Adam. So our title today is it possible to legislate safety? And I want to begin with a little bit of background, a little bit of history perhaps as well. So way back in 2000, we had something called the COPA Commission, COPA Child Online Protection Act, which, by the way, got held up in court for over 10 years and was finally thrown out. But it did create a commission to look at tools and rules to make kids safe online. Come on forward, there's seats up here. I'm here as well. And I served on that commission as well as another 15 other commissioners. And the results of that study was that there was no silver bullet to this issue, that we needed a combination of technology tools to keep kids safe, and last but not least, that education was key. 2002 saw the Thornburg Report, Youth Pornography and the Internet, and after a year's deliberations, they came up with very similar conclusions. No silver bullet, education is key. Only last year, Adam and I think possibly a couple of other folks here in the room, Owen, I think you were on that, were served on the MySpace AG Berkman study, which looked at keeping kids safe in social networking sites as well as the internet, and came up with the conclusions that there was no silver bullet, we needed a combination of technology tools, and education was key. Although there was some very close scrutiny of issues like age verification and identity authentication, which is what the AGs were particularly interested in us looking at. And now from this year we have the NTIA Online Safety and Technology Working Group, which is going to be looking at ways to keep kids safe online, with some detailed looks at things like data retention and some of the, again, education and technology tools to keep kids safe. Recently, well, a few months ago in the UK, we had the Byron Report, which was a 6-month intensive study of the impact of the internet and computer games on children. And Tanya Byron, who was brought in by Prime Minister Gordon Brown, will be with us at our annual conference in November to talk about it and the subsequent work that's been going on there. Yet again, no silver bullet, combination of technology tools, education is key. So we've had numerous attempts to regulate internet content over the years. We've had calls for age verification and identity authentication. And today we're going to look at two very different bills, both trying to deal with the issues and many challenges that none of us will deny exist out online for kids. And so first we're going to look at the Megan Meier Cyberbullying Prevention Act, and I believe there are copies of the bill in the room and outside if you don't have it, introduced by Representative Sanchez. And then next we're going to look at the Safe Internet Act, introduced by Senator Menendez. And we're going to ask Adam to do some analysis on both of those bills, and then of course get into Q&A and bring you all in as quickly as possible. So, without any further ado, Mercedes, would you like to take it away?
Sure. Well, I want to thank FOSI for all the work that they do to keep kids safe on the internet, and I appreciate all of you who came to this panel to hear about our bills, because by being here today, you're really demonstrating that you know that cyberbullying and online safety are very important issues that face youth in our times. And organizations like FOSI and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children work passionately day in, day out to help protect children and keep them safe. And this is a subject that's very important to the Congresswoman as well. And, you know, when you think about it, when I think about it, growing up, I never had to, you know, log on to my MySpace to see if anyone has sent me a message, or go to my Facebook page to see if I've been poked or, you know, tagged in a picture, or, you know, how my online reputation and personality is being changed by friends and others out there, and how I'm being perceived. And if I've, you know, when I was a kid, doing research meant going to the library. It didn't mean Googling it. So a lot of things have changed. And children and adolescents today have really come to rely on the internet for everything, as have adults. But our safety concerns, you know, for adults and children are unique and different. Some are interchangeable, but some are also different. And this means we're not just dealing with face-to-face issues anymore. And that, you know, goes to bullying as well. We're not dealing with face-to-face bullies anymore. Our children out there aren't dealing with that anymore. They're dealing with cyberbullies. And growing up again, when I was a kid, bullying meant, you know, somebody was giving you a hard time at school. Maybe they're not playing with you during recess, or they're, you know, it gets worse, like pushing you during school hours. And then in high school, you know, there's different types of bullying that occur. And that is still going on, and we acknowledge that that is an issue. Just because the bill doesn't address traditional face-to-face bullying doesn't mean we don't think that it's an issue. But there's something else going on too. People, children, youth are getting bullied in their homes now. So the Congresswoman thinks that this is the big difference, and this is why it's creating such a negative impact on the kids that live in the states right now. And we see that when, you know, children commit suicide, and even in other ways when they lash out, like in the Columbine case and others. When you can get bullied any time of the day, any hour, anywhere you are, because you have a cell phone, or when you are in your bedroom and you're logging on to use your computer to Google your research project that's due the next day, and you're getting harassed constantly by IMs or emails or things that come up, this is a very big problem. A problem that is different than just bullying at school. Not to say that it minimizes that issue in itself, but this is a wholly new issue that we're dealing with today. And bullying of any kind is not a minor nuisance, or is it something to be laughed off. And it's not a rite of passage, and it can be severely harmful to children, and it could have very damaging effects on their lives. Educating people and youth about online safety is crucial, is absolutely crucial. The Congresswoman believes in to this type of harassment, and to make sure it doesn't become the status quo. And all of us are concerned about keeping children safe online, from online predators, from harassment, from identity theft, from fraud, from a variety of different things. And so is Ms. Sanchez. Luckily, most kids know to delete messages from creeps, like for credit cards, and for the most part. But what they don't know is how to protect themselves. They don't know how to protect themselves from bullies and stalkers that they deal with every day in their lives, you know. And that's why she's introduced this legislation, to create, you know, a punitive solution here that would punish people who cross the line of just the normal types of behavior, and really, you know, puts a focus on the criminal behavior that can be taking place. And she has introduced in the past legislation to create grants and programs that would deal with online internet education safety, and we've been fortunate enough to work with Mr. Menendez's office on that in the past, and she's dedicated a bulk of her time in Congress, and she's been here to these issues, specifically to keeping schools safe, to bullying, to cyberbullying, to online crime prevention for children. So that just because this year she's only introduced the cyberbullying bill doesn't mean that she doesn't care about a holistic approach to the issue. And I think what Stephen said is just right. There isn't a silver bullet. And you know, she's not claiming that this bill is the solution, end all be all, but it's certainly a component of the solution. And that is why she introduced it. The bill would give prosecutors the ability to punish the individuals who use electronic means to engage in cyberbullying. And online bullying in our bill involves intentional threats or comments sent through the internet or other electronic means. So it can be your cell phone, it could be your iPhone, it could be some sort of PDA, or something else that is invented that's not in our contemplation today, that, you know, 20 years from now, we're like, oh, we didn't know that this thing would exist in this electronic means, and it could possibly cover that. And it covers behavior that's meant to coerce, intimidate, harass, or cause other substantial emotional distress. And the behavior has to be repeated, hostile, and severe. This is very important. I mean, these are the elements of the crime that's being laid out. And it's important to remember that this bill is not about hurt feelings. This isn't about protecting kids from, you know, emails that just say, I don't like you today, or, you know, it's not about that. This is about punishing criminal acts. This is about when something goes from a normal act into a repeated, hostile, and severe act. And then, yes, it is time to put a stop to it and to have a law that protects people from that kind of criminal behavior. It's a new type of criminal behavior. And we fail our kids when we stop listening to them and they feel they've exhausted all of their resources and turn to suicidal acts. And that's just not something that we can ignore.
Okay, thank you very much. Jason?
Well, thank you to FOSI for having this, for having me here. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm sure at least half of you are here not just for the chicken, but either way, thank you for listening. And again, there are copies of Senator Menendez's bill, the Safe Internet Act, outside for anybody who didn't get it here, and these nice little folders here. I first just wanted to say I completely agree with Mercedes that, you know, this is a serious problem affecting our kids.
Someone lean on the lights, perhaps?
I think I don't have prepared remarks. So yeah, I think that everybody can agree this is a serious problem. It's a relatively new problem, and it's going to continue to be a problem, probably grow in size as the internet becomes even more prevalent, if that's possible, and becomes even larger and more important in every part of life. So this is something that has been largely ignored. Congressman Sanchez has been a leader on this. Senator Menendez has also been very interested in this for a few years, but you know, generally speaking, there isn't that much interest in this, unfortunately. Great groups like FOSI are, you know, really good at increasing awareness about this and sort of getting people to realize that this is an important issue that we have to address. So the senator also recognizes that. And I think I'll start off by just saying that I guess answer the question that is the topic of discussion today: can we legislate safety? And I think the answer is simply no. We can't legislate safety as much as we want to, as much as Congress thinks that we are all powerful and that we can sort of fix everything with some resolutions or some bills. We can't do everything. Congress can facilitate safety. Congress can make it more likely that children are safe. And, you know, it's the same thing with crime. I like to compare it to is Congress can't physically go out there and secure our streets, but we can provide the resources to police, to local law enforcement, the FBI, so that they're more likely, that they're more able to keep us safe, to put away criminals, to keep our streets clean. You know, the same thing with our schools and education. You know, we can't increase graduations rate from Congress. Teachers are the ones who do that. Parents are the ones who do that. Students are the ones who do that. We can increase money for schools. We can build nicer, better schools. We can improve technology at schools. We can pay teachers better. But we can't be, you know, you can't have, the senator can't go to every school in New Jersey and, you know, start teaching kids and try and increase graduation rates that way. So we can facilitate things. We can make it easier for those in the field, the teachers, the firefighters, the police officers, the military, fighting men and women. We can help them do their job more effectively. And I think that's sort of what our bill, the main goal of our bill, is to do. We can't personally teach kids to be safer online, to understand all the consequences of putting a risky picture online or sending it to their boyfriend or girlfriend. We can't stop that, but we can, you know, teach kids. We can have give schools and teachers and nonprofits the resources to teach kids about the consequences of their actions, so they'll fully understand it and realize the pitfalls of going down this road, and will hopefully make better decisions that way. So that's the focus of Senator Menendez's bill. It's the School and Family Education About the Internet Act, or the Safe Internet Act. And essentially we provide $35 million per year in grant funding for nonprofits, state education agencies, and local education agencies to develop curriculum to promote internet safety for professional development for teachers, anything that sort of brings in teachers, parents, and students together to tackle this issue, to tackle this problem. And, you know, we don't want to shut off the internet. I mean, as ridiculous, even if we were able to, which of course we wouldn't be able to, but, you know, I like to think of it almost as the Model T car when that was invented. You know, sure, it all of a sudden created this new danger for car accidents and deaths and pedestrian accidents, but we didn't just say, you know, this thing is too risky, let's not produce cars, let's just keep on using horses. We said, no, let's put in some common sense place guards, let's teach people about safe driving, let's put in a speed limit, let's make people wear seat belts. And I think the same thing is true about the internet. The potential of the internet, the great, you know, use benefits of the internet is so, it's mind-boggling how great the internet can be for growth, for economic growth, for education, for connecting people all around the world. So we don't want to cut it out. We just want to teach people the responsible, safe way to use the internet. And so again, this grant program would be $35 million a year. Our colleagues in the House, Washington Schultz, who our staff is back there, Sean over there, are introducing a very, very similar bill in the next couple of days. And essentially this legislation would provide $35 million in grants. And it would be based on objective best practices. So we would have outside contracting to sort of figure out what's out there right now, what's going on, because there's a lot of sort of patchwork of internet safety initiatives out there. Different states are doing things, even counties and school districts are doing different things. So, you know, the research would be sort of collect all the information out there, figure out what's going on, figure out what's working, A, B, or C, and then develop grant guidelines based on what's working the best. And this will be constantly monitored year after year, and grant guidelines will always be able to be adjusted and updated to meet the times. As Ms. Shady says, who knows what's going to happen, never mind 20 years from now, 2 years from now, you know. Nobody heard of Twitter a year ago, and now this is apparently live on Twitter. So, you know, so I think that's another important thing, that we can't just say, all right, this is the risk today, this is the situation today, let's just go with that. We have to be constantly updating and looking to try and fix, to try and sort of meet the next threat, and to be ready to be prepared to take on whatever comes next. So you know, that's basically it with the bill. We've been lucky to have a strong endorsements from a lot of major groups here, including FOSI. Thank you very much, Stephen. And I guess that's pretty much it from my end. If anybody has any questions after Adam's done, I'd be happy to hear them.
Great. Thanks very much, Jason. So, Adam, you've heard those two presentations. You've got the bills in front of you. What do you think?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here, Stephen. I appreciate it, as always, to be at a FOSI event, and it's my great honor to serve as chairman of the Academic Advisory Board for FOSI. In that role, I just frequently advise the rest of the board to depose of Stephen and put me in charge as president of the organization. But it hasn't yet worked. No, I joke.
Bad advice.
No, Stephen and I have been working on these issues for a long, long time together, and I want to start by stepping back and mentioning what we've learned from the past and where we stand today, because I think it's really important to understand a few things about the nature of the debate we're having in Congress right now and the nature of the discussion we're having here today. Because if you look back over the past 10 years of this debate, 15 years of this debate actually, it started really in the mid-90s with the passage of the Communications Decency Act, there's been long-standing concerns about online child safety. But a lot of those concerns, in my opinion, have been misplaced. None more so than the recent techno-panic, if you will, over online child predation. And there's been a great deal of concern about our predators lurking around every corner and trying to grab and snatch our kids. And the reality is, as Stephen and I have found on these online safety task forces we've been serving on, and all the research has been showing, is that that concern has been greatly overblown. I've been trying to find a way to conceptualize this or put this in simple terms, and I was just reading last week this wonderful new book by Lenore Skenazy called Free Range Kids. And she's a far better writer about these things than I, and she points out that the chances of any child being kidnapped and killed, abducted and killed by a stranger are almost infinitesimally small at 0.00007%. Put another way, if you wanted your kid to be abducted, you'd have to leave them outside for 750,000 years before they would be abducted. Now, the chances of them being struck by lightning or, many other types of things that could befall them are far more serious. The point is that we do a bad job of identifying legitimate risks to kids in this country. And online, this has become a serious problem because we've engaged in a lot of fear-mongering and dedicated a lot of time to debating things in Congress, such as the Deleting Online Predators Act, DOPA, or at the state level, mandatory age verification requirements that ultimately would do very little to address what are the most serious problems online today for kids. And what are the most serious problems? Well, it gets down to cyberbullying at the end of the day. This is a legitimate problem. And I want to applaud Representative Sanchez and Senator Menendez for both identifying this and focusing Congress's time and attention and resources on this very important issue. Because guess what? Kids have always, throughout history, as we've known, engaged in bullying and said awful things to one another. And guess what? They're doing it even more today online. And that's a problem we've got to deal with. But of course, there are different ways to go about dealing with this, and we have two different approaches here with the Sanchez and Menendez bills. So let me just say a few words about each before we get to a discussion, interactive discussion about this. I think when I look at these measures, and I've just released a paper just literally an hour ago with my colleague Baron Soka, who's here from Progress and Freedom Foundation, called Cyberbullying Legislation, Why Education is Preferable to Regulation. And that partially explains that title, why I think that the Menendez approach, at least as it stands right now, is probably preferable to the approach we see in the Sanchez bill, for a couple of reasons. First, you can't go wrong with education as an approach, because education and building awareness about concerns and talking to kids about issues, it builds lessons for a lifetime. And it builds resiliency in kids to allow them to respond to different situations and scenarios in different ways, talking to their teachers, talking to intermediaries, talking to other authorities who can help them out, or their parents. And that's really something we haven't done enough of. We've been too busy doing the fear-mongering about don't talk to strangers, or be careful about everything you put online. And some of that's sensible. But really, it's what kids are saying to other kids that is really, really troubling right now. So we need to address that, and education is always a great way to start doing so. Second of all, it's infinitely constitutional. I mean, we've spent a lot of time and effort in Congress over the last 15 years. The CDA, COPA, COPPA, SEPA, I could go on. DOPA. Fighting about legislation that ultimately ends up in the courts. It ends up in the courts for a long, long time, making a lot of cyber law lawyers very, very rich. And basically, ultimately, at the end of the day, doesn't go anywhere. It gets stuck in the mud, or gets struck down by the Supreme Court, as COPA recently did after a 10-year legal ordeal with 3 trips to the Supreme Court. How did that make kids better off? I would suggest that it didn't. So education is always and everywhere going to be constitutional, because after all, you're just talking to kids about concerns and issues. You're not trying to regulate the internet or speech in any way. So it avoids thorny First Amendment issues. So that's why I think the Menendez approach is pretty good. I mean, I have some quibbles about the DOJ being the authority who's in charge of doling out grants, but it's good that it's in consultation with the Department of Education, HHS officials, and others. Nonetheless, I won't get into that. Now, moving to the Sanchez bill just very briefly, I want to first say that I have not ruled out the idea that we need potentially targeted criminal sanctions against those involved in really egregious forms of online harassment. But there's a problem here, because as I started by saying, most of this activity, this bullying activity, and it's important we distinguish between bullying and harassment. I think there is a line there. Because bullying, when we talk about it, is really kid on kid. And harassment, we usually talk about in more of an adult context. It doesn't mean that there can't be times when you have adults harassing kids, but this is a distinction not drawn in the Sanchez bill, I think, which is that a great deal of this activity that we're talking about criminalizing at the federal level is kids. And maybe some of it elevates to the level of criminal activity, but quite frankly, that is not how historically we've dealt with bullying in this country in most contexts. We've dealt with it, first of all, at the state or really the local level, the school district level. And we've dealt with it through rehabilitation or other forms of punishment at the school level, suspension, things like this. Counseling sometimes comes into play. And every once in a while, yes, the law does get involved, especially when these kids are older, teens, and very close to being adults. But these distinctions are lost a little bit, I think, in the Sanchez bill. It's not clear to me that this is a wise move if it does really say we are going to criminalize all bullying amongst kids and sort of throw the book at them. I'm not sure that's the best approach. Now, if it's adult on kid, it may be a different story. And of course, the title of the bill was the Meier Act, and this involved an adult who was engaged in some harassing activity with a younger girl. And that raises serious issues, in my opinion. Although the facts of that case have been disputed about, was the original message sent from one young girl to another, so on and so forth. There's no doubt that Lori Drew, an older woman in her 40s, had something to do with it. And that does raise a serious question about why couldn't Lori Drew be prosecuted under a state law that maybe draws out the distinction about the harassing activity of an adult on a child, on a minor. That's where I think we need to go here. And what Baron Sokin and I have suggested in our paper is that perhaps at this time, the most preferable approach would be to allow some state experimentation with how we go about prosecuting or criminalizing bullying or rather harassing activity. And I really do think the bullying part of it, we need to think more about the education, mentoring, prevention, intervention route, and see what kind of resources we can devote to that. And then we think about a more targeted solution for the adult on kid problem, or even sometimes the adult on adult problem, which can be really in more of the mode of stalking. Anyway, I think I'll leave it there, and we'll probably have more time for discussion.
Great, great. Thanks very much. And we're coming out to questions very, very quickly as well, by the way. But Mercedes, in Fox News piece and in other bloggings that I've seen, there's been a questioning, and Adam has to a little bit in his remarks here, questioning the constitutionality of this bill. So, and I know that Representative Sanchez wrote a piece in the Huffington Post recently that addressed that issue. Why don't you say a little bit about how you've responded to that criticism and how you think the language of the bill will hold up in court?
Well, okay, well, it's hard to say how the language of the bill will hold up in court if it were ultimately challenged and made it through the system all the way up to the Supreme Court. But going to the constitutionality of it as it stands without making predictions of how the court would decide this, we do think that there definitely under the First Amendment, there are types of speech that are not protected, okay? And those are generally things like fighting words or actual threats, or, or things like you can't go into a movie theater and scream fire. That's the typical example everyone gives. Those types of speech are not protected, and you don't get to use the First Amendment as a shield when you are conducting yourself or saying things like that. So we do feel that the language of the bill is clear to a certain degree, that it does not create unnecessary prosecutions, and it doesn't make bloggers liable for cyberbullying. Like all the bloggers out there writing about this bill, writing about their criticisms on this bill, couldn't be prosecuted under this bill. And I think that is important to understand, because there's an intent requirement. However, the Congresswoman is always open, and because there has been a lot of concern about the constitutionality, we're now looking on how to make the language a bit tighter, if you will, to address that. So it will be, if it were to be contested, it would be more cohesive. Yeah.
So Adam, wouldn't you agree that what's being crafted here is to deal with the most egregious things that you've just been describing? So couldn't you support such a bill?
Yeah, I think Mercedes is making some good points here about, the language of the bill about coerce, intimidate, harass, or cause substantial emotional distress is certainly more defensible from a First Amendment perspective, because you're talking about speech that potentially involves harm to others, and that's where the courts have traditionally made some exceptions to the First Amendment. That being said, some of these things can be tricky at the margins. I'll give you an example of online activity, not so much from the social networking context, but one that I spend a lot more time on, which is online gaming. Yes, 40-year-old men can engage in online gaming and be proud of it. And I still do with my kids a lot, and many others. And, I hate to say it this way, but there's a time-honored tradition of flaming within these games. There's a lot of heated talk among online gamers about, you really suck at this game, or whatever else, or I'm going to kick your butt, or I'll kill you, or whatever. Wait a minute, you're going to kill me? No, I don't really think they're going to kill me, right? So there could be times when at the margins, this is tricky. And we don't necessarily want everybody to jump to a criminal solution to harassing speech online if the harassing nature of it is really more harmless than harmful. I recognize, though, that these are difficult distinctions to draw, and I'm not ruling out the idea of the need for a federal approach to this, although state experimentation might tell us the better approach to take. I do, however, think that context matters, not just in terms of the words that are used, but who the parties are, and whether or not we have a situation where, for example, it's an adult and a child, and clearly the adult knows it's a child, and they're engaging in that harassing activity. That's the easier case to make. But when it's two kids who are both, say, 12 years of age, and they're engaging in online gaming or, talking on a certain website, and they're engaging in this sort of banter, sometimes very heated banter, and throwing around some of these heated terms, boy, that's tough. I don't know if I want that to default to a criminal model. And I think that could be resource intensive. I also think I don't like the idea of turning these kids into essentially perpetrators and throwing jail time into the mix and fines. There are other ways to deal with those problems, is all I'm saying.
So it'd almost be like the sexting issue, which we've got kids who are both the perpetrators and the victims of child pornography, that's probably a discussion for another time.
Yes.
Jason, either from a personal point of view or from your office's point of view, where do you fall on the Megan Meier Act here?
Well, I think firstly, it's very important to have a debate about this, and I think it's great that the Congresswoman is looking into this and is increasing awareness about this, and it's just really important that we're sitting here talking about this, and I think there are legitimate points of view from both sides on this. I do think that education is the most effective way to tackle this issue, and so does the Senator, which is why we have our bill. So I do think that the education is the route to go. On the other hand, as we just mentioned with the sexting incidents, there are times where people are being tried as felons now, or being for sexting, and when it's it's between friends or a boyfriend and a girlfriend, and they're being treated as sexual predators now. I know there's a case in Florida where an 18-year-old is being tried as a sexual predator right now, or he is a sexual predator.
He's a registered
sexual predator. So I think that certainly there is a need to look at our criminal statutes right now and how we handle these, because I think that's going overboard, treating this 18-year-old as a sexual predator. When generally we sort of use that term as someone who is going after young people. So I think that the issue definitely needs to be addressed, but I do understand the constitutional issues, and I do agree there could be some constitutional issues about where you draw that line. But I also think we have those same issues with free speech generally. If we see neo-Nazis walking down the mall, if they have a permit, they're allowed to do that. They're allowed to, display, demonstrate, no matter how hateful I might find that, no matter how hateful anybody else may find that, they can do that. Where does that cross the line before that person then becomes someone who can, do that terrible act at the Holocaust Museum the other day? Where do we sort of draw that line between that they're just free speech and they're promoting hate and they're sort of advocating murder. So I think we have those issues, in life every day, and just because we would extend it to the internet, it makes it a little bit larger, but we still have those issues. But generally speaking, of course, I think that education is the most appropriate, the easiest way to go about this, and the most effective way. But I think a debate has to be had on how we're going to treat these people, these young people, and sort of what we want to define what they're doing as.
All right, well, let me...
Can I make a few comments before we open it up to address some of the things both of you have said? The Congresswoman absolutely believes that preventative measures are necessary, education is necessary, not just for children, but for adults, for school teachers, for everyone who touches a child's life. That is important. But as I said before, sometimes things become criminal, and those acts should be punished. Now, I think you brought up a really great example of kids being charged with distributing child pornography and, potentially getting this like sexual predator tag on them for the rest of their life. And that's because we don't have a good tool for prosecutors to deal with this issue. So we have to use a tool, this other law, that doesn't really address the issue, but we want to stop this behavior. So we need new laws, new tools to deal with these new issues that face these children. And that's why the Congresswoman introduced the Meier Cyberbullying Act. To address a couple of your concerns, we do believe cyberbullying is a very serious problem, probably, really up there with something that's not talked about as much as like the techno-panic issues that you brought up. And there's a little bit of a definitional issue, because there's cyberbullying, there's cyberstalking, there's cyber harassment. There's some general consensus on what that means, cyberbullying being minor to minor, cyber harassment involving adults, and cyber harassment and cyberstalking. Right now, 38 states, approximately 38 states have cyber stalking and cyber harassment statutes, and if you're interested, anyone who's a congressional staffer can go online to CRS. There's a great CRS report written on this that was, instigated by the Congresswoman because we wanted to do a survey of what really is out there. Schools are really well equipped to deal with the bullying issue, and they have been making progress in this area, but they can't make something a crime when a crime is occurring. They can't create a law that says what you did is a crime. And I think you said that you kind of made the differentiation between education versus regulation, and this law is not really a regulation. It's a criminal penalty for a criminal act. We're not telling people how you can act on the internet. We're saying when you act like this, that's a crime. So I think it's important to know that we're not trying to address like, you can't write this, you can't send this, after X amount of emails that are negative, you're cyberbullying. No, this is about something more dangerous, I think. And we understand that there's been some issues with the language as far as the constitutionality is concerned, and recently started working with the Center for Safe and Responsible Internet Use, and I believe you also cite Nancy Willard, who's part of that group, in your paper, and been working with her as well as other people that are very active in this field, like Justin Patchen and his partner Samir, so we can create a more holistic, comprehensive approach, and really looking forward to getting their input as well on this.
Adam, quick response?
Yeah, very quickly. I can appreciate several of those points, and you're right. There is a distinction between regulation and criminalization. I guess what I'm saying is that, criminalization of some of these offenses is what we're talking about here. But that does involve some potential regulation of the net. But regardless of that distinction, I don't necessarily I'm not making a hardcore First Amendment-based argument here. I'm making more of an argument about, do we want to criminalize activities among youth? And do we want to do it at the federal level? And I hate to put you on the spot on that, but I'd love to hear you articulate what
Sure.
the Congresswoman thinks is the right thing to do about when it is kid on kid. Is this bill saying we are going to have a federal criminal approach as opposed to a intervention-based, mentoring-based, counseling-based approach?
Well, I think you made a good call, and shows me that you read the bill. That we don't say that this is a bill dealing just with minors. We don't say that. And unlike COPA and other things that, and I think in your paper you also suggested an age limit, so either 13 or 16 or 18 and discussing that. We don't have that in here for that very specific reason, because there are situations that can arise, like the Meier case. Now I realize there's issues with the facts of that case and whatnot, but at the end of the day, this girl was bullied and she killed herself, and it didn't have to happen that way, okay? And there's issues about Lori Drew and all of the emails and all of that. Those things aside, we believe that what happened to her was criminal and it shouldn't have happened. That's why she doesn't say minor on minor or adult to minor or limit it in that way. It's unfortunate, but we do have a juvenile justice system. We do, okay? And the bill does not mandate incarceration. It can be a fine. And it comes really from, we looked to the Violence Against Women's Act and their cyber stalking statutes, and looked to other things that were similar, and took that as our guideline and used that penalty there, because it's already been something that's been in effect. And cyber stalking can happen between minors as well. So even under a VAWA right now, someone who's a juvenile or a minor can be convicted, right, for cyber stalking.
Okay, well, let's hold that there. I'm going to come to questions in a moment, but I just want to challenge you, Jason, for a second.
All right.
Playing devil's advocate here. I mean, it's all very well education. I mean, that's just a panacea, right? I mean, it's Congress passing on its responsibilities to really deal with, the nasty things that are out there.
That's one way to put it.
So that's one way to put it. And the second point is, wait a minute, why are you putting all this money through the Department of Justice? Isn't this exactly going down the line that Adam was just talking about? That's where the techno-panic has come from in the first place, right? Still playing devil's advocate. Why wouldn't you put it through, I don't know, education or something which would make more sense?
Well, address those 2 points. First of all, I think that, again, Congress is not an executive agency. We're not the ones. We can't go into classrooms. We can't go into homes, members themselves, and say, stop doing that. Or, this will haunt you for the rest of your life if you put that picture online. Senator Menendez cannot go around from house to house. So, the best way to reach kids, where are they 6-7 hours a day? They're at school. So we think that passing a law criminalizing it is one approach, but then it would just be the police officers enforcing. I guess Congress would still be sort of punting it to the police officers in that sense, and then the courts if there is any constitutional concerns. So I mean, I think that what's the most effective way to reach kids? The most effective way is in school. And through private organizations, we're involving a lot of cable companies, a lot of online. Verizon is trying to get involved. Comcast is getting involved. So you try to reach them on TV, commercials. You try to reach them at school through multimedia applications, and we really think that this is the most effective way. And Congress, again, we're the facilitators of this. We're the facilitators of this process. We provide the resources for the experts in the field, for the educators to teach kids about this stuff. On the second point, I'm sorry, Department of Justice. The Department of Justice, second point. So we have actually just decided that Department of Justice actually has a pretty good record at running these types of grant programs. I wouldn't say that they're the leaders of the techno craze. I would say they were just sort of the tool used, to sort of go after these sexual predators. And we read the bill carefully. We actually have Department of Justice making the grants in concurrence concurrence with the Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services. And that concurrence is a pretty strong word there, that they sort of all have to agree on it. If you read the bill, there is not a single word in there about law enforcement. We don't, again, this is just a solely an education-based model here. So just because it does go through Department of Justice, we sort of narrowly tailor the specifics and what the grants can be going to. So we don't think there's any possibility that Department of Justice could hijack this, even if they wanted to, which I don't think they would. And another reason, I mean, in terms of having Department of Education, it seems like they would be the lead agency. Just seems just by reading the title of the bill, Safe and School and Family Education. So you got school and family and school and education in there, even in the title. But we've been told that Department of Education has this huge backlog of programs that they have to fund, and essentially even if we got this thing passed and authorized, it would be very difficult. We'd have to wait a while and then might not even get it funded through Department of Education. So we really needed to go through Department of Justice, was the most the easiest way, the path of least resistance to actually get this thing funded. And we think we sort of narrowly tailored the specifics of the grant application, the grant guidance, so that this will not be about law enforcement. This will just be about education. It's going to schools, nonprofits, and that's it. It's going to schools and nonprofits. So
Okay.
Not a word about law enforcement in the bill.
All right. Thank you. So, questions? Yeah.
Hi, Andrew Feinberg with BroadbandCensus.com. I have a question both, one from Ms. Salem and one from Mr. Tuber. Ms. Salem, you said earlier that this bill, the Meier bill, would not create unnecessary prosecutions, something about bloggers couldn't be prosecuted. But then when it came back to sexting, you said we don't have a good tool for prosecutors. We need new tools. And by giving prosecutors this tool, they're going to use it. And by the very nature of prosecutorial discretion, there will be prosecutions that are unnecessary or are driven by moral panics or moral outrage. One can make a comparison to the Lori Drew federal prosecution, although I won't make an explicit one there. The circumstances are so strange. But then you later said that, and you said after unfortunately, but I hope it was a different sentence, we do have a juvenile justice system. We don't have a federal juvenile justice system. So why is it that you are, in this bill, and by you I mean the Congresswoman, taking kid-on-kid juvenile activity by juveniles and making it a federal crime prosecuted in federal court with adult penalties when you're explicitly aware that these are kids, and under state law, under most circumstances, this will be dealt with by the juvenile justice system?
Okay, so to address your first issue about, I believe it was the sexting.
Well, no, it was about prosecutorial discretion.
Okay, so, yes, thank you. So your concerns are very legitimate, and the Congresswoman understands that. Prosecutorial discretion exists with any criminal law. It does. And the words that we use in our law are very similar to the words that are used in many of the cyber stalking and cyber harassment bills.
For adults.
Well, they're meant for people who can, behave in this criminal fashion. And our bill, you're right, cyberbullying is mainly perpetrated by minors on minors, or youth on youth, okay? And our bill doesn't say it's, this bill only applies to people who are 16 years old or younger, or 18 years old or younger, okay? It doesn't. So we're not purposely trying to put kids in jail.
No, but it doesn't exclude that possibility.
It doesn't, and many laws, federal criminal laws, do not. You can see that I don't know of one federal criminal law that says this only applies to people that are X years old and above. okay?
So there's no separate system.
So those laws can still apply as well to people that are minors. And we didn't want to purposely say that it's a certain age limit and below. The point I think the Congresswoman is most emphatic about is protecting children, okay? And that is more important to her than anything else when it comes to this bill. And if that means like there has to be a punitive solution, or part of it being a punitive solution like this to deter people from conducting this type of criminal behavior on children, okay, like the case here with Lori Drew and Megan Meier, even though those, like you mentioned, the issues there can be looked at differently. We don't have a federal juvenile system, but there's nothing that says juveniles cannot be criminals under federal law as well. That goes for everything. Okay, that goes for all of the federal laws that we have.
Right,
Okay.
but
So this one is no different than that. Also, to address the sexting issue that you brought up, it's just about, these are new crimes that are occurring.
I'm sorry to interject.
Sure.
I wasn't explicitly bringing up the sexting issue. What I was bringing up with that was what you just said. There is no separate juvenile justice system in federal law, and that much like you have some of these prosecutions which are a little out there, where you have juveniles being prosecuted as adults in the federal system for what are kid-on-kid behavior that may or may not be criminal, and we're putting these federal severe criminal penalties on it. You're doing essentially the exact same thing with this bill, and you're taking what is essentially kids' behavior on other kids, and you're raising it way up, way over anything that they could possibly imagine, and you're going to be putting them in a federal district court with federal penalties in a federal facility. And doesn't that seem like a big step?
Okay, let me interject. First of all, there's nothing in this bill that mandates incarceration, okay? That would be up to the trier of fact to determine whether it's a judge or a jury when this is if this bill were to become law and federal prosecutors were to use it.
Penalties.
Well, it's a two-year and or fine. 2 year. There's, I don't know how you define adult penalty versus a minor, like a penalty for a youth, but we haven't said that this bill is